Did I turn the song? Oh, there we go. There I am. Um, yeah. One sec. I know, Brother Carson, you're right. It's like it feels weird talking down on people. I'm gonna just come to the front. I'm not even joking. Like I was here. I think it was like 2 years ago. Spoke. It felt a little weird, but kind of just went with it. Oh, wait, I didn't bring a stand. I did. Here we are. But yeah, I guess a bit of a introduction because I'm sure a lot of you guys don't recognize me, or maybe this is the first time we've met. I don't know. I'm Agustin, Espinoza. I've been coming here, I want to say, for like the past, 8 years or so. Just about. I did miss last year, which is unfortunate. But I'm glad to be back. A lot of you also probably don't recognize me because in that year that I was gone, I grew this beard. So I'm just throwing that out there. It's a possibility. Anyway, so before I begin, I did want to pray to invite the Holy Spirit here tonight. Also, I want to drink some water because it's a little dry. All right. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, once again, I just want to thank you for this beautiful day you've given us. I want to thank you for this time that we have to share in your word. This time that we have just to be in your presence, Lord, to be in communion with one another and to share your love, your hope, your peace, your blessing with one another. And I just ask that in this moment that we can all just open our eyes, open our hearts, open our minds to the word that you're going to speak through me, Lord. I ask that it's not me who speaks tonight, but it is you through me that speaks. I ask that you just give me the boldness to speak your words and just to let everything just go and let you take control tonight, Lord. And I just ask that you just bless the rest of camp meeting and bless all those who were able to make it here tonight, and also bless those who couldn't be here tonight, wherever they might be, whether it be out of sickness or being too far, Lord. I just ask that you just bless them wherever it is that they are and just be with them today and on their journeys and on Salvation Road, Lord. And I just ask all this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Now, before actually getting into the message, I did want to say a few thank yous because I feel like of all the years I've been coming here, I haven't really had the chance to say thank you. So first off, I don't know if my parents will ever hear this or get the recording of this or whatever, but I did want to thank them because they've been supporting me and pushing me and giving me the means to get here. So if they ever get the chance, thank you. Also, and I say this out of like the genuineness of my heart, I like calling them Grandma and Grandpa, but Fert and Keith, thank you for letting me stay at your house. It has been wonderful. You guys are amazing hosts. I couldn't have asked for a better family to stay with, so thank you so much for everything you guys have done for me. And also, I want to thank Brother Carson and the other speakers that I've talked to throughout the week that have blessed me and just helped me and guided me and put me in the position that I am now. So I do want to thank them for everything, and the prayers also from earlier. So now, Salvation Road. I'll be honest, when I first heard this was the theme, because I remember 2 years ago, they didn't give me the theme. I kind of just came up here and did whatever it is I wanted. Which, funnily enough, I actually ended up going right with the theme. So now having the theme kind of just works out a lot better. But anyway, Salvation Road, my brain just went to road trips. I've done lots of road trips. I'm only 23. I know, I look older with the beard, but I'm only 23, and I've done a lot of road trips. Granted, most of them have been up to here, but I've done a lot of those. Personally, not a big fan of road trips, especially if they're like, I want to say more than 5 hours. Because anything more than that is just obscene. Like the brother from Tuesday, they drove 30 hours. I couldn't do that. I'd rather fly, personally. I will risk the flight. I'll risk the turbulence. God willing, I will make it here regardless. Like this year I flew. But anyway, I personally don't like them because there's just so much stress that comes with a road trip. There's the costs that's involved. There's just the preparations. Like just before you even go, you have to make sure all the people that are going are ready. You know, we always have those last-minute packers who pack the night before. I know some of you know who they are. And then we have to make sure the car's running, make sure, that everything is perfect for the vehicle. And despite that, on the road, anything can happen. You know, tires can go out, transmission can run out of fluid because you might have forgotten to check it. The car can just break down in general. There can be an accident, worst case scenario. But then again, everything can go perfectly. Now, personally, all of my, or I don't want to say all, but most of mine have been pretty, they haven't been great. I'm going to describe two of them to you that weren't super. I do have a good one, don't worry, because mind you, they're all coming up here. So it's not that I didn't enjoy my time here. I didn't enjoy the journey. But so the first time, I think this was, I want to say 7 years ago, we were going up to, I think it was Turner, Oregon for youth camp, right? Yeah, Turner, Oregon. And we probably made one of the worst mistakes you can make. We left at night on this road trip, so our drivers had been awake a full 12 hours before we even left. So they were going to do that and then drive another 12 straight hours up to Oregon. So that just, in and of its own, is just bad because everyone's tired. And then we were in a big group, so we fit most everyone into one van. We did have another car, but the people in that car, they were comfortable. They were fine. There's only, I think, 3 of them in that car. And they were chilling. But in the van, all guys, we were packed pretty tightly, not completely uncomfortable, but pretty tightly. And one of us had the great idea to play this game. Who can stay up the longest? Mind you, we had already stayed up a full 12 hours. We'd been awake. We'd done stuff throughout the day, packed. And now we're driving, and it's pitch black outside. There's nothing to see, only the people around you to talk to, and maybe some music, and that's it. And I mean, not to boast, but I did win. I didn't enjoy it because the next day I was out of it. I was completely just droned out. First day when we got up there, I couldn't speak to anyone. I was just really out of it. Everyone else, they were pretty out of it too, but not as much as I was because I didn't sleep. So, and one of the scary things too about driving at night is cops are a little more spread out, especially when you go through California, through the middle of it. So there was a couple of times when we were going, well, let's see, the speed limit in California, I think, is 65. A couple of times we were going, I want to say close to 100, because we were booking it. Now, the drivers were also tired, so they were just trying to get there as soon as possible. So it was a crazy trip, to say the least. It was a bit hectic. Then we went to youth camp and camp meeting. All that was great, but man, was I exhausted when I got there. It was a long trip. Now, second trip, it was, I think the first time we went to the Cascades, the place that we've been going to for the past, let's say 5, 6 years or so. 6, thank you. And we had brought, I think, the biggest group we've ever brought from California. I think there was 13, 14-ish of the youth, and then my parents actually came along that year, which was really cool. Now, we didn't want to bring a lot of vehicles that year because we're gas is going to be expensive. I think at the time, gas was close to $4 per gallon, so that was a nightmare. And we didn't want to bring a bunch of vehicles, so we're oh, we'll rent a 12-person van. That seems like a great idea. So we do that. This time we packed the van with a lot more stuff because we were bringing musical equipment, sound equipment, just a bunch of different stuff, plus all the luggage, pillows, sleeping bags, and people. So we packed that thing, and we're pretty tight in there. And luckily for me, my parents let me go in their car for a bit. But I think after 2 hours, 2 of the people that were in the van, that were my cousins, they were getting car sick and claustrophobic, and they just couldn't stand it, so they pushed me out. So for the rest of that, I think from California to here is about 15 hours-ish. And we were stuck in there. And now, at this point, the entire van, I think minus Brooke, Mason, was or Kinkino now, sorry. That whole van was a bunch of guys packed like sardines and just booking it up here. We were squished and uncomfortable for the entire trip. We did try to make it here as fast as possible. And every time that I think about some of the worst road trips I've had, it's always, we one-shot it. We just go for it. There's no breaks except for gas and occasional like leg stretches, but for the most part, we just book it here. And now that I think about it, I forgot to mention the worst part. Since they're all in those two scenarios, they were both mostly guys in the vehicle. If you've ever been on a road trip with a bunch of guys, odds are they're gonna pass gas. All right? It's gonna happen, and it happened multiple times. So you would imagine my relief when we got here. It was great. So believe me, they were pretty bad. Now, on the second road trip that we had, we actually almost ran out of gas before getting here. So that was also a little bit like scary, but through God's will, we found a gas station that had gas, and we made it here, and then we were finally at peace, and it was great. But that trip, oh my gosh, that was bad. That was really, really bad. Oh, I can't imagine doing that again. And that's why for the last couple of years I've been flying up here, because I've been we've been a smaller group, and it's cheaper, so, and they're not as comfortable, but believe me, 2.5 hours is a lot better than 14 hours with a bunch of people passing gas and just uncomfortable, and believe me, it's a lot better. Now, I did have one good road trip up here, and that was actually for my cousin Fair's and Brooke's wedding. This time, all the people that tend to one-shot and do all that, they had already gone ahead of me. I had stayed back with my family because we wanted to go up very calmly and very, relaxed. We think it took us about 2 days to get here. We stopped like halfway through. We saw the scenery. It was all beautiful. It was really nice. We stayed at a hotel. We wake up the next morning. They're frantically calling us because my uncle Javier, who was with us, was also he was officiating the wedding. So he had to book it right then and there. And then the rest of us, we kind of just calmly came up. And then it was peaceful. And I enjoyed that one time. So I do enjoy journeys like that. It's just, I like to space it out. I like to enjoy the scenery, maybe take the long route, which I think we did take. Yeah, because I think that was, when I looked on Google Maps, it was 16, 17 hours the way we went. But my dad likes to do that. He likes to space things out. He's not one that likes to one-shot stuff. So the whole point I'm talking about road trips is because a lot of times life is like a long road trip. It's, it has lots of bends, turns, U-turns, detours, dead ends, wrong ways, one-way streets. A lot of different things can happen in life as well as in a road trip. Sometimes you can break down like a car. You can run out of gas. You can run out of steam, overheat. A lot of things can go wrong in life. A lot of things can happen. And let's see, where was I? And so in this particular message that I want to bring to you guys, we're going to talk a bit about detours. Now, when I was looking at detours in and of themselves, detours, I think, when I was looking at the definition of it, it says, a long roundabout route taken to avoid something or to visit somewhere along the way. Now, I want to focus on those two aspects of a detour, avoiding something or to visit somewhere, someplace. Now, if you look at the two road trips that I took, the first two, we avoided any and all distractions and just booked it straight here. Now, a lot of times, at least for me, not a great plan. I don't like it. Sometimes it can work. If you need to do it and you have to just go straight forward, go for it. And then the second time when I went for the wedding, we took a longer route. We saw different things. I think at one point we experienced 5 different forms of weather. We had hail, extreme wind, extreme heat, rain, a bunch of different things happened all at once. I think I saw a tornado at some point. It was really cool. So, a lot of times that can be a good route, but also taking distractions and going along a different route and seeing different things that you might not need to see can be a bad thing. So if we look at the passage that Ellie read earlier, in Matthew 7:13-14, it talks about 2 distinct paths in life. Where am I? There I am. 7. Now, there I am. All right, so I'm reading from the NIV, but you can read from whatever version you have. And it says, enter through the narrow gate, For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. So you'll notice that Matthew speaks of these two distinct roads, a narrow gate and a narrow road that leads to salvation, and then this wide open road and wide gate that many enter through and go, and then they lead themselves to destruction. Now, in life, we'll see many different paths, a good path, a bad path. Now, in a road trip, you can take the detour or choose not to take that detour, depending on what it is, whether it's a good path or a bad path. Now, good paths generally tend to not be easy. They can be very difficult. There can be a lot of problems along the way. They don't always seem rewarding at the time. They don't have that immediate satisfaction. And a lot of times we'll never really understand why that is the good path. We'll never truly understand sometimes. Maybe later in life we will, but in that moment we'll never truly get there. We'll never truly understand why. And a lot of times in the bad path or the wide gate that Matthew calls it, it definitely seems a lot easier most of the time. A lot of times, you'll see immediate results. You'll have that instant satisfaction. And then it may even look very desirable. Now, I know that my descriptions are very vague, but they constitute, I want to say, like 90% of the decisions and paths that we take. This is not a solid set in stone rule book for deciding a good and bad path. But this is a way to test and see what those paths may be. Now, as Christians, it is our goal to choose Jesus. It is our goal to choose salvation. And right now we're going to look at the life of Peter and the choices he's made throughout his life, the things that he has done, and what became of him afterwards. So first, we're going to look at Matthew 16 and verses 16 through 19. Now, these verses are in particular are interesting because Jesus is talking to Peter, or to the disciples, if I remember correctly. It is 16. Matthew 16. Here we go. And he says this. I'll add verse 15 to that. I just realized that it's important for context. Jesus asked Peter, "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whether you bind on earth will be or bound on heaven, and whatever you lose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Now, it's interesting when you look at this because a lot of times we give Peter the name, Peter the Rock, if I remember correctly, Peter the Rock, and in that context, I think in the original Greek it's called Petros or Peter. But that means rocks, solid foundation. So Jesus is kind of setting Peter up to be the foundation of the church after Jesus gets crucified and goes back to heaven, goes back with the Father. He's setting him up to be that foundation for the church. So Jesus kind of puts him up there in this position. He's like preparing him for this. And then prior to this, we see in Matthew 14, 23 through 33. I'm not going to read that because it's very long, but it's a very good little story of when Jesus walks on water. Now, in this instance, in this moment, the disciples and Jesus had just finished talking with the crowd. I believe this was right after the splitting of the bread and fish and dividing into, I think, feeding 5,000 people. They had just done that. Jesus told the disciples, hey, go ahead of me, cross the lake. I will dismiss the crowd. I will, let them go, and I will meet you guys there. They go along, and they get caught in a storm. The disciples are in the middle of this lake. They're terrified. They're confused. They're scared for their lives because they could die at any moment. But then Jesus, after dismissing the crowd, and I believe he prays, he just walks out into the water and walks over to them. Now, in that moment, when the disciples finally see Jesus, they were frightened. They were scared. They didn't know what to think, what to do. They were like, oh, this is a ghost. Like, what is going on? But Peter saw that it was Jesus, and he cried out, Lord, is that you? Call me, and I will come to you. And so Jesus called to him. And for a moment, Peter chose correctly. He chose the right path. He chose the detour that led to Jesus. And he walked on water for a couple of steps. But then he felt the fear, and he saw the wind and the waters roar, and he lost faith and fell into the water, and then cried out to Jesus to save him. And Jesus pulled out his hand and told him, man of little faith, what are you doing? He picked him up and took him back to the boat, and then the waters calmed down. And, in that moment, Peter made two distinctly different choices. At first, he'd made the choice to follow Jesus, to go out into the storm, go out into what seemed like chaos and destruction. And he did it fearlessly. But then in a moment, notice, he completely changed and just fell into the dark water. Peter, when we look at his life in the early ministry, when he's following Jesus, he does tend to do this a lot. He'll make a great choice, and then in the next moment, completely flop. He does this a lot, and we'll look at the next story that I have of Peter, and it's in Matthew 26, verses 69 through 75. Now, this is probably, at least to me, one of the saddest moments in Peter's life. This was after they had captured Jesus and were putting him on trial. And Peter was just wandering through the streets, and he meets these people, and I'm just going to paraphrase because these are big chunks, but these people, they recognize Peter, and they ask him, weren't you with Jesus? Weren't you a part of his group? Weren't you with him? And he said, no, I wasn't. No. But then they ask him again, weren't you with him? Didn't you see these things? And he's like, no, I didn't see anything. I don't know who you're talking about. I have no idea. But then they ask him again, are you sure? I'm pretty sure I've seen you with him, walking alongside him, part of his mission, his thing. Peter, once again, for the third time, he said, no, I did not, no. And then he heard, I think it was the rooster crow 3 times, and he realized what had happened because Jesus, prior to this, had told him that you will deny me 3 times after asking him, do you love me? Do you love me 3 times? It's a very sad moment in Peter's life because when you read the end of it, it says that Peter wept. He just cried and truly just felt this horrible pain of denying the man who put him up on this pedestal. He said, you're going to be the foundation of my church here on earth. You're going to be the rock, He put that on Peter, and yet Peter made the choice to deny him 3 times. It's heartbreaking to see that in Peter's life. Afterwards, he wept in this immense pain. And then we look on to see in his future life that he did create the foundation of the church. He did become the man that Jesus said he would be. He did have that, He became that foundation for what we have here today. So the question really becomes, will we make the right choices? Will we make the right detours in life? Will we make those decisions when it's crucial, when it's critical? And I'll be honest with you guys, a lot of times we probably won't. We are human. We make mistakes. Things happen. But the awesome thing about choosing Jesus and salvation, the wonderful thing is that Jesus gives us those chances to come back to him. To just, he like when Peter was in the water, Jesus reached out his hand to pick him up. We have those opportunities to come back to him and make those choices. And when we do continue on the path of salvation, what's awesome about it is this idea of sanctification, where you follow Jesus, you love Jesus, you become his friend, you create this beautiful relationship. Like we talked in camp, you create this wonderful friendship with Jesus. You create this love, this connection with him. So much so that you have this respect for him. You have this love, this just reverence to what it is that he is. And you start choosing better choices, better paths, better detours in life. You will still mess up. That still happens because we are human. But you will consistently make better choices in your life. Now, I know that this is going to be, for all of us, our road in life is going to be long. A lot of things will happen on the road of life. You never know what will happen, what we'll see, what we'll experience. We'll experience great joy, but also great sadness. We'll experience happiness and blessing and peace, but we'll also experience tribulations and temptation. And I want to end this with a bit of a personal story. This past year, I've made a lot of interesting choices to get to myself to this point, because at my age, normally people are done with school. You know, they get their bachelor's and they move on and get a career. I wasn't quite there yet, but that's for a lot of reasons. When I first got out of high school, my whole plan was to go into a certain direction because it seemed like that was the direction I needed to go. A lot of people who know my dad know that he's a very tech-oriented guy. He's a tech at Saddleback College. He, for the most part, does a lot of the very Apple and Macs-oriented stuff at the school, and that's always what he's done. And ever since I've been little, he's always been grooming me and teaching me and showing me all these different things about computers, and I loved it. I really did. I even worked at the same office at Saddleback for the past, 4 summers or so, and I loved the work that I did. I really did. A lot of fun. I enjoyed it. A couple of kinks along the way, but for the most part, it's great. I loved it. But then I started going to college and taking classes in that field, and I want to say a semester or two in, I didn't like it at all. I was so, my head was just I'm going to do this. I'm going to take all the calculus classes, all the science classes, physics, computer science, programming. I had this whole plan laid out, and then a few semesters in, I'm just I can't do this. I don't like this. I can't see myself sitting in a desk for 8 hours straight just typing and doing all this programming. I couldn't do it. It was driving me insane. And don't get me wrong, I still love computers. I do a bunch of stuff in that area, but that is not my calling. That is not the road I was meant to go on. I detoured into a place where I didn't need to be. Now, I want to say 2 years ago, when I came up here last and I spoke, a lot of you encouraged me into a certain direction. And that direction was teaching, whether it be here on this stage or hopefully one day in a high school classroom somewhere, anywhere really, teaching the youth of the nation to, in my case, appreciate history and look at the mistakes of the past to fix the future so we can become a better nation, become a better people, become a better person. That is now my current goal. I've actually transferred schools. the school I'm now going to, I'm taking all of my history and political science classes. I remember correctly, the stack of books I had for each semester has been about like that big, roughly. And it's all required reading, so I've had to read all of that. I've had like a miniature library in my car for like the past 2 semesters. It's been great. Not only that, I've been doing a lot of writing, which personally, writing is not my strong suit. Definitely not. But it's a required thing in my major now, so it's like I'm writing, I think, over the past 2 semesters, I've written over like 100 pages worth of just material, which for me is insane, but despite all that work, it feels right. I've made a choice in my life where I'm now headed in a direction that everything kind of just fell into place. When I applied to the school, I didn't think I was going to go there. I had no idea. I had thought I was going to go somewhere closer to home, somewhere that is kind of geared towards teaching, but yet those schools said no. And then now at the school that I'm at, they immediately said yes. They set up a bunch of things for financial aid. I have a couple of scholarships, and I have like all these things kind of just gearing me, and a lot of like reasons saying this is where I'm meant to be. And I've been so thankful for this past year that's kind of giving me a new perspective, a new reason to go and head my life in a completely different direction. I mean, computer science and teaching are completely different things. And let's not mention the wage gap that it has. I mean, programmers make, oh man, I almost wish I did the math, but I know they make on occasion, like if you work for Google, let's say, they make roughly, I want to say, close to 6 figures or something in that range. Teachers, I want to say in California, make about $40,000 a year, something like that. Yeah, teachers don't make a lot. But you know, I'm okay with that. That's not the reason why I'm going into this field. This is not the reason why I'm going and learning and becoming a teacher. And so this past year, I've made so many decisions, so many little detours and directional changes in my life, in my journey. And I've noticed that when you line yourself with what God wants, because the teaching thing, I'll just kind of like for context, you know, a lot of you encouraged me 2 years ago to head in that direction, but there's always been like one person, like for years prior to that, I was like, have you thought of teaching? Have you thought, like my mother has been like a really big proponent of this because she's a teacher and she knows the way I explain things and how I like just talk in general. And she knows like what I do, and she's always been a big person that's been pushing me in that direction. But just I'll hear it from random people here and there. I never really paid much attention to it. I've had this opportunity for like years at this point. And then finally last year, I made the choice to take that journey into teaching and to go into that direction, that field. And so now that I've done that, so many things have just gone right. Many things have also gone wrong. But let's just say typing a whole 14-page paper in a night is not fun, but it's doable. But, you know, everything has kind of just led me in this direction. And like coming here, writing this message, I thought about everything that's happened to me in the past few years, and it just led me to this place, this message, these verses, these stories. And I just want to just ask that all of you who haven't made the choice of salvation, choosing Jesus, choosing the road to salvation, I would encourage you to do so. It is a wonderful path to take. It is a beautiful thing to do, to make that choice, to change your life. And I know that, especially in the early years of that change, of that choice, it's not going to be easy. You know, I've seen the change that happens in a person. I've experienced it myself. You lose a lot of things. You lose a lot of friends. You lose a lot of people you cared about. Things will happen. You will experience pain. But the awesome thing about choosing God and choosing Jesus is that he helps you through that pain. He comforts you. He guides you. He leads you through all of that. And so I encourage those of you who haven't made that choice yet to maybe make that decision tonight. I mean, the thing that I always kind of a little bugged by in church is that a lot of times, like before baptism, they'll have you take classes, and I'm not saying that those classes are bad. Like I took them, I did a lot of them, and this is where I am now. So I'm not going to complain about them. But if you look in the Bible and the examples, like people would listen to Jesus, be baptized in the next few minutes, and then that was it. You know, it was instant. Things happened within hours. So I do implore you guys, if you haven't made that decision, if you haven't made that choice to follow Jesus, to make him your friend, your brother, you know, have that relationship with him, I do encourage you tonight to make that choice. I don't usually do altar calls, but you know, if you feel called to come up here, pray, I'll pray with you. Other ministers will come up here and pray with you. But I do encourage you guys, if you haven't made that choice, please do. Or even if it's not a call to salvation, but just a call to realign yourself with Jesus, to rekindle that connection, rekindle that friendship in your life, to choose the detour that leads to him. If that's what you need tonight, I do encourage you, please, to come forward. You don't have to. I'm going to ask the worship team if they can please come up and prepare for like the final songs. Once again, like, I know it's not easy. The path and the road of life is long. It's hard. Things happen. You get a lot of regrets, a lot of pain. But you also gain a lot of joy, a lot of love, a lot of peace. And so, you know, if that's what you're called to do tonight, if that's what you feel is in your heart, I do encourage you guys to please, you know, come up. I'll stick around here and pray with you and whatnot. So